On energy, we continue our slide of national self-harm. The Federal Energy and Climate Minister Chris Bowen, who should of course come on here and explain his plans to us, only turns up when no one challenges his climate alarmist renewable energy zealotry. The very factors that have led our energy-rich country into energy poverty, a situation where we face energy shortages and skyrocketing energy prices. But listen to Bowen on the ABC last night, and the solution to our woes is just to do more of what got us into this mess.
But it still doesn't change one iota, Sarah, the fundamental point. I know I keep making it, but I keep making it because it's so fundamental and important, that renewable energy is by many lengths of the straight the cheapest form of energy, and those supply chain constraints don't change that. The key is getting more renewable energy on at a much faster rate. Our transition in Australia has been too slow and too disorderly. Our policies are all designed to make it faster and to make it more orderly.
Look, this stuff is deeply troubling, isn't it? He says we aren't going fast enough when the problem is we've gone too fast. We've put in enough subsidised renewable energy to make our reliable fossil fuel energy unviable. So it's checking out. And all this is happening before we have enough renewable energy and storage and transmission to keep the lights on. Something that on current technology we may never be able to do anyway, according to the science. But there are no reality checks from Labor and Chris Bowen, just the same climate-driven zeal to meet United Nations targets.
We have 8 years, 86 months between now and 2030 to get emissions down, because that's the key decade, in terms of holding the world as close as possible to 1.5 degrees. I know you're talking about energy prices, but let's not forget about forget about the very important international challenge of climate change. But at the same time, of course, getting more renewables is the best way, in fact the only way, to provide any possibility of getting downward pressure on energy prices.
This bloke thinks he's trying to save the planet, and at the same time we might be able to look after your energy prices too. Look, this is the big lie at the heart of the Labor, Greens, Teals and left Liberal climate and energy nonsense. The lie that any of this will change the climate or save the planet. Fiddling with our 1% of global emissions, or even one day eliminating it, will not have any impact on the global environment, because global emissions continue to rise. Other countries like China, which produce almost a third of all global emissions, are continuing to increase those greenhouse gas emissions. So unless you deny the facts, unless you deny the science, you have to admit that our current plans involve massive self-harm for no environmental gain. Even the former chief scientist was forced to admit that a few years back. Meanwhile, we live in a country with coal reserves, gas reserves and uranium reserves that are the envy of the world. Yet we aim not to use any of them in the future, preferring hundreds of billions of dollars in extra renewable investment and a dodgy energy future. And listen to how the experts talk about our energy price challenge in the meantime.
What we don't want to see in this transition to a lower emissions and hopefully a more stable price outlook over the hill, we don't want to see too much roadkill as we climb the hill. And that's where I think a lot of consumers feel as though they're very exposed.
Yeah, that roadkill he talks about is you or your small business. That's the roadkill they're hoping to avoid while they're playing around with their energy system to meet arbitrary UN climate goals that won't change the climate. Is it any wonder that Johannes Leek draws Chris Bowen like this in his unplugged electric clown car, egg on face, claiming massive electricity prices don't damage his credibility? Great stuff, Johannes. Labor is headed for one hell of a lot of electricity pain over the next couple of years, and the worry is how many Australians will be shocked by the consequences.